Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
7:06 on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here on a busy Thursday morning, the 6th day of June. And if that date starts your heart fluttering, there's a reason for it. Today is the 80th anniversary of D-Day, the invasion of Europe by the Allied forces to finally end the tyranny of Nazi invasions. Alex Kershaw, World War II historian, who will better articulate what I just tried to do, will join us in 30 minutes. I meant fascist occupation at the hands of the Nazis. I don't know. I couldn't come up with the word occupation, Mercedes.
Well, you got there. You got there eventually.
I appreciate that. Coming up at 8:05, we'll talk to Andrea Levy, who is trying to keep some level of virtual learning for Montgomery County students. And at 8:35, Jamie Cutright's doing the same thing in Frederick. I'm Larry O'Connor. That's Mercedes Schlapp.
Gloria Stefan. No, I'm kidding. Mercedes Schlapp.
Yeah, you love your sound machine.
You were like, don't drink your Cuban coffee. I'm like, I'm drinking my Cuban coffee.
If you listen to this program during the 2020 campaign, you heard John Solomon on the program quite a bit. His website, Just the News, reports, well, just the news. And since you were patronizing our content here on WMAL and you were reading John Solomon's website, you knew that the Hunter Biden laptop was real. It was authentic. It was genuine. It was not a product of Russian disinformation. It was not some sort of propaganda campaign dreamed up by Vladimir Putin. And yet it took yesterday for the FBI to finally officially verify that in the court of law. This, of course, the trial against Hunter Biden. John Solomon joins us now. And John, I mean, I guess there's some vindication, but it's kind of shallow and hollow, frankly, because I'm waiting for Leslie Stahl's apology. I'm waiting for George Stephanopoulos and all the corporate. They get much bigger paychecks than you and I do, John. And they were not only were they wrong, but they were willingly wrong because they tipped their hands on the scales, in my opinion. What do you think?
They did. Just keep in mind that action, that letter by the 52 experts, well, it occurred just a few weeks before people made a judgment about who the next president would be. It helped Joe Biden win the presidency. In fact, the emails I uncovered a year ago showed that was their intention, that Mike Morrell, the former acting CIA director, actually was working with the campaign to try to give Joe Biden a talking point to counteract what Donald Trump was talking about, which is that there might have been a corrupt relationship between Hunter Biden and his father and these foreign influences. And it's a remarkable thing to go back because not only was that one of the big lies, not only was the laptop lied about, but remember, Joe Biden looked right into the camera and said, my family never did any of that business with China. They never got any money with that. I never met my son's business partners. All of those were lies, too. And it's that combination of all those different lies together that I think fooled the American people. They went into the 2020 election with false information about Joe Biden. They're a lot wiser today, but it took 4 years to get there. And
so are there any – I mean, I was saying that the House majority should bring out these 50, 51, 52 intelligence officials who all have very valuable security clearances right now that they're able to utilize to cash in on some pretty cushy, well-paid jobs. Shouldn't they explain how they reached their conclusions and whether there was any influence from the Biden campaign? Why has that not happened yet, John? They can't they?
There were a lot of talk a while ago. Hey, we'll actually put something in an appropriations bill and strip the 52 of their security clearances, something Congress could do if it chose. But like so often, the promises that Congress has made haven't really come through. There really hasn't been many consequences created by the House Republicans since they took over for what was really deceptive efforts by Democrats and their allies to fool and mislead the American public. Now, we're starting to see a little bit. We just saw a referral this week for Hunter Biden and James Biden for what House Republicans say is pretty compelling evidence that they lied to Congress. That's one, but there's got to be some other consequences coming forward. I keep an eye on the appropriations bills this year. See if one of those bills ends up with a rider or an attachment saying, we're going to strip anyone who signed that letter of their credentials, or if some of these agencies that were involved in some of the mischief also starts to see big budget cuts. Anthony Fauci's agency, maybe the FBI. Those are things I'd be watching for as the appropriations bill starts to go through Congress.
But even with the appropriations bills, John, because we don't have the Republicans don't have the Senate majority, it kind of doesn't really go very far. So it seems like the House Republicans are limited What do you think is going to come out of these criminal referrals for Hunter and Joe Biden? I mean, Merrick Garland, I don't see anything coming out of it. Your thoughts on that?
Well, listen, if Merrick Garland follows the rules he said he was going to follow when he appointed David Weiss, the most likely thing is Merrick Garland will say, I can't make a decision on these, and he'll send it to the prosecution team, the special prosecutors, who are currently prosecuting Hunter Biden, not only in Delaware this week, but in California in September. Under the standard that Merrick Garland said, he should send it to the special prosecutors, and they should make a decision since the department is conflicted. We don't know the answer to that yet, but certainly the standard he claimed when he made the appointment of David Weiss would suggest that those would go there. If not, even if Merrick Garland gives them a pass at the end of this year, I think it's likely in a Trump administration that those will be revived and reviewed.
Another reason to vote Trump. John Solomon joins us. JustTheNews.com is the website. And you're working on another story, too, John, that is incredibly important. Let's remind everybody who Cassidy Hutchinson is. You'll remember this testimony from the January 6 hearings.
Angry response to that. Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now. To which Bobby responded, sir, we have to go back to the West Wing. The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel.
All right, now everyone remembers that vivid imagery in prime time. Cassidy Hutchinson describing, although, of course, she did not witness any of this. This was all third hand, but she was told that President Trump tried to grab the steering wheel from the driver of the vehicle, the presidential vehicle, to take it up to the Capitol. Now, I don't know about you, John, but when I heard that, I was like, okay, well, let's hear from the driver. That would be a pretty critical witness. Instead of this third-hand account from Cassidy Hutchinson, why can't we hear from the driver? And, well, you've uncovered why we didn't hear from the driver.
Yeah, it's such a remarkable thing. Congressman Barry Loudermilk, who's overseeing the Republican version of the J6 investigation, calls Cassidy Hutchinson the REO Speedwagon witness. I heard it from a friend, I heard it from another friend, I heard it from another friend. She was so far removed from the truth. And right after that testimony in June 2022, 6 months before the 2022 election, there's a theme here. The Democrats were approached by that driver, the Secret Service driver. I know this because I saw his testimony this week. And he offered in July, in August again, in September again, to Benny Thompson and Liz Cheney, saying, please let me testify. What Cassidy Hutchinson told the American public isn't true. I'm a first-hand witness. I'm not REO Speedwagon. I was there. I was the driver. It never happened. To use the word never. It never happened. Well, Benny Thompson and Liz Cheney said, nah, we're not really interested. They waited right until the day before the November 22 election to interview him, and then they never released that testimony, allowing Americans once again to go to polls deceived by Democrats about a very important story involving Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And it took 2 more years to locate that transcript and now to make it public. Congressman Barry Loudermilk, a determined investigator, the Democrats intentionally kept that Secret Service driver from telling the American the truth, certainly before the election. And I think their long-term goal was never to make it public, but Barry Loudermilk somehow found these transcripts and now is beginning to re-educate the public about just how deceptive Liz Cheney, Benny Thompson, Joe Biden, the 52 intelligence experts. There's a theme here. For the last 4 to 6 years, Democrats have intentionally deceived the American people about information really crucial to our elections.
So just real quick, I want to shift gears here to the potential vice presidential picks. Do you have a favorite or someone you're really keeping an eye on?
Well, I don't have a favorite. I try to stay neutral on all these things. But, I think there's a pretty clear list sitting out there. I think that J.D. Vance, Byron Donalds, clearly 2 that are being looked at. Governor Burgum, I think, in recent months has grown closer to the president and former president, and I think there's an interesting relationship there. And he's got a great background, as the president said, in energy, which in this country right now is a very important issue. It's the driver of so much of our inflation under Joe Biden. So I think those are high picks. There's many other really good ones. Tim Scott clearly going to be on the short list. The president often brags about how well he does on the campaign trail for the president. So there's a really strong, deep bench. Any one of those going up against Kamala Harris in the vice presidential debate will be quite a spectacle. Very strong debaters, very strong communicators, but a very rich one. I think the president hasn't decided yet. I think, and Elise Stefanik, another one that I think we should keep a close eye on. A really strong team.
Hey, John Solomon, can you stick with us there's more to get to with you, and we haven't even touched on the classified documents case. Great. John Solomon, Just the News, sticks with us.
You've heard the news. Now get the facts. It's the Vince Colonnese Show, weekdays 3 to 6, right here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
We continue with John Solomon, Just the News. And, John, I'd love to get an update. I haven't spoken to you in a while since Judge Eileen Cannon down in Florida has put a pause on that case. This is a Jack Smith special counsel who's prosecuting Donald Trump over a mishandling of classified documents. You have some special insight into this, of course, because weren't you one of the individuals named by the Trump transition team there to sort of oversee some of the documents with regard to the archive and the Trump presidential team?
Yeah, it might be a little overstated. What I did in the spring and summer of 2022 is ask permission from President Trump, like I did Richard Nixon 3 decades earlier when I broke the big stories about Ross Perot's secret background with the Nixon administration during the 92 campaign. I'd like to go into your archives as a journalist and try to find the Russia collusion documents that you declassified and that the Justice Department never released to the American public. So my role was really very I wasn't involved in any of the management. It was just, as a journalist, I wanted permission to go in. He gave me permission to do that.
Gotcha.
You have to be named a representative. But that said, yesterday was a very big day for Donald Trump in the courts. First, in Georgia, the appeals court put a long pause on that case because they're going to determine whether Fani Willis should even be in charge of it. And then down in Florida, a very important ruling by Judge Eileen Cannon. She is going to consider a very important and potential constitutional issue, one that could go all the way up to the Supreme Court, which is, was Jack Smith properly appointed as special counsel? And the argument that many constitutional experts, including liberal experts that I've talked to, say there's a real problem with this appointment because he was not appointed to be a chief prosecutor in charge of making decisions like most U.S. attorneys. The law requires a chief U.S. attorney to be a decision maker in each of the districts. And so in the history of special prosecutors, almost always a sitting U.S. attorney is named. You saw that with John Durham during the Durham investigation. You've seen that with David Weiss. They were congressionally approved, Senate-approved prosecutors. Jack Smith came out of The Hague, out of the International Criminal Court. He came here. He was never Senate-confirmed, and a lot of experts have said that makes or invalidates his appointment. It doesn't follow the law. This is both left and right experts, and so Eileen Cannon has said, I'm going to look at that. That's going to be a big win for Donald Trump.
So we've seen a big day in court for the courts for Donald Trump yesterday, but there is a reality that we still saw, the horrific verdict coming out of the New York trial. But with the sentencing coming down July 11th, of course, a few days before the Republican National Convention, what do you expect Judge Merchan's going to do?
That's a great question. I think first we have to get a pre-sentence report, see what the New York system recommends for a first-time alleged offender like President Trump. Most of the experts think the most likely outcome, people like Alan Dershowitz and others I've talked to, think that he's going to sentence him to prison and suspend it, so it's hanging over his head. That gives Democrats leverage. If Donald Trump does anything on the campaign trail they don't like, they can try to go revoke and send him to prison. And it allows them to say he's been sentenced to prison, but it's suspended, which would be part of their convicted felon strategy for the fall. I think no matter what the judge does, the American public is very keen to what has happened in that case. They know that is a political case, not a legal case. The polling shows that there hasn't been any real significant bump for Joe Biden. And I think at the end of the day, Americans long ago reconciled that this lawfare the Democrats have done doesn't have anything to do with law. It has to do with politics. And they're going to treat it as such when they make their decisions for who's the next president's going to be in November.
John, these are busy times, and I just got to ask, since you're on, I'm looking at all of the stories we just covered, from the reality behind the trumped-up story that Cassidy Hutchinson told to the J6 committee, and by the way, we didn't even touch on Liz Cheney's complicity in that, and her unwillingness to hear anybody else's account of what happened there, to the FBI laptop and the fact that it was valid. And are you noticing that you and only a handful of other journalists are on top of these stories, that you're kind of alone? And again, once again, the corporate media, they have very deep pockets over there at the networks and the cable stations. They're sort of ceding all of this ground to you. Are there any real journalists left out there? I know you don't like to criticize your colleagues too much, but there's a reason why JustTheNews.com is doing so well.
Yeah, listen, I think it's difficult for these journalists who were a big part of propping up these false stories that Mercedes spent so much time, and Matt and others and you and I knocking down. It took us years to get to the truth about things that really misled the American public. In 2016, Russia collusion. 2019, Ukraine impeachment. Now pretty clear. Much of the evidence for that impeachment wasn't accurate. The Hunter Biden laptop isn't true. It's a conspiracy to think that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden were making money off of foreign interests. All of those were not only spread by the Democrats, they were sustained by the mainstream media, and many times the mainstream media and their so-called fact checkers called me and others who had real evidence conspiracy theorists. Well, I have a T-shirt now that says, "All my conspiracy theories came true." I need more. So, but I think it's hard for them now to go back and admit it. I want to shout out a guy, Gunkester, recently did a fact check that reversed 4 years of Washington Post reporting on the Burisma, Hunter Biden, and the firing of the prosecutor. He acknowledged that there was a change in policy made by Joe Biden, just like I had reported. There are little efforts. I get a lot more calls from reporters in mainstream media, network news, in the last 6 months than I have, trying to get right on certain things. But I think part of what keeps them from there, not only did they get it wrong the first time, it's embarrassing to have to go back and admit it they get it wrong. The good news is we don't need them for the American public to make decisions. I'll just tell you this little poll. It's, I think, a very important poll. A couple months ago, the AP NORC poll found that I think about 2/3 of Americans now believe that Joe Biden did something unethical or illegal in his dealings with his son's business partners. They didn't get that from reading the New York Times or not watching the network news or watching CNN. They got it because people are consuming media around the original gatekeepers. They now realize they've been misled, and so they're widening their lens, and that gives folks like us a chance to tell them the truth and give them facts and let them process it.
Yeah, well said. You're absolutely right. And I've just never seen in the corporate world in America an industry that has so many resources and such a huge market share willingly, voluntarily giving up that market share and allowing others to come in and compete and actually steal their audience away from them. But that's what they're doing for their own selfish political reasons. But God bless them. It gives us a lane, John, and we'll take it. Thank you, sir. Always great to talk with you.
Great honor to be with you guys. Have a good day, Jay.
7:25.
Now. On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:36 on O'Connor and Company, the 6th day of June. Coming up in the 8 o'clock hour, we're going to explore virtual learning in Montgomery County and in Frederick County. At 8:05, Andrea Levy of Montgomery County, and 8:35, Jamie Cutright, Frederick County, where they're now trying to remove whatever is left of the virtual learning program, which has actually benefited a lot of students who don't fit in appropriately in a classroom setting. Why are they trying to do away with it? We'll get to that coming up. I'm Larry O'Connor. Good morning, Mercedes Schlapp.
Good morning, Larry O'Connor.
It is the 6th day of June. It is the anniversary, the 80th anniversary of the invasion of Normandy, the D-Day invasion. Although it's funny to call it an invasion. I guess technically it was, but it was really the Allied forces now liberating the countries of Europe from invasion, from the Nazi invasion. And joining us right now to reflect on this very important day is Alex Kershaw. He is a resident historian for Friends of the National World War II Memorial and author of the book Patton's Prayer, A True Story of Courage, Faith, and Victory in World War II. And it's good to talk with you again. We had you on for Memorial Day, but boy, this is an important landmark day to take note of. Thank you, Alex.
Great to be with you.
Something's happening, by the way, everyone should know, down at the World War II Memorial today. It began at, 5 a.m. They're reading off the names of all of the participants in that invasion, 225,000 of them who made that sacrifice. It's an incredible... can you sort of give perspective to this incredible undertaking 80 years ago, especially considering the relative lack of technology compared to where we are today to be able to coordinate this?
Yeah, it was an incredible operation. It's the greatest military operation of World War II. We landed over 150,000 Allied troops along 5 beaches on June the 6th, 1944. If you think about this, the inventory for all the items needed in preparation for that invasion was over 70,000 different items that we needed just in terms of the preparation for that invasion. So what's worth stressing is that there was no plan B for Operation Overlord for D-Day on June the 6th, 1944. Had we failed, and we came very close indeed, in fact, as I speak to you right now, at this very moment 80 years ago, we were very close to failure. There was no plan B. We would not have launched that invasion again, and the fate of countless millions of Europeans at this moment 80 years ago hung in the balance.
It should also be noted, famously, Dwight Eisenhower, the commander of the Allied forces and the architect of the D-Day invasion, he had already written a handwritten letter taking full, complete responsibility for the failure of D-Day. Should it have been a failure, he was ready to be held 100% personally accountable. And it makes me emotional to think of that kind of leadership and responsibility, because we don't see it today. Even after the debacle that happened in Afghanistan, not one person stepped forward to take responsibility for 13 service members who died because of a failed operation. Here, Dwight Eisenhower was prepared. He had already written it out, his full accountability. That's leadership, Alex.
That's the greatest example of American leadership in the 20th century. That's why Dwight Eisenhower, who was 54 years old on D-Day, became one of America's greatest presidents.
Alex, we were also looking at the fact that you're talking about they had about over 850,000 men, 148,000 vehicles, 570,000 tons of supply that landed on the Normandy shores. How were these military, the soldiers, the officials, how were they able to be successful at Normandy?
Actually, right now, 80 years ago, it's in France, it's around about midday. And right now, we are finally securing the bloodiest of the 5 invasion beaches. That's Omaha Beach, where over 900 Americans were killed. It's by far the deadliest beach of all the 5 beaches. The second would be the Canadian beach, where around 300 Canadians were killed. D-Day boils down to immense courage by just a few. If you look at the situation right now on Omaha Beach, the beach is about 5.5 miles long. It is littered with literally over a couple of thousand dead and dying Americans. And to break off that beach, it took the courage, the fortitude, the grit, the guts, the balls, as I would say as a Limey, of maybe 5 or 6 dozen young American officers and non-commissioned men. They were pinned down under intense machine gun fire. Those who've watched Saving Private Ryan, the opening 20 minutes of that movie, recreate exactly what happened on the deadliest part of Omaha Beach. Yeah. These men were, most of them who'd never been in combat before, were pinned down under murderous fire, and they literally had to stand up and run or walk or stagger into a hail of machine gun bullets. But they did so. And that's the difference between success and failure on D-Day. Less than a couple of hundred Yanks on Omaha Beach saved Europe.
Alex, I remember Ronald Reagan's speech 40 years ago, and he made a point to talk about the Rangers who scaled Point du Hoc, a 110-foot cliff, a 90-degree vertical. And I've seen pictures of it, but this last summer, Meredith and I got to go to Normandy, and you don't really fully grasp this until you're there and you see it. As these men scaled this cliff as they were getting shot at. But these Rangers, I think over like 250 of them started, 90 made it. But it was such an important, critical part of the operation. And you got the reason the Nazis weren't really prepared is, you tell me, did they think, oh, there's no way they would try it here? It's too dangerous. It's impossible to climb these cliffs. There's no way Normandy will be the place of the invasion, because they really were kind of caught off guard, weren't they?
Yeah, they were caught off guard. It's important to stress that the Germans knew we were coming. They absolutely knew we were coming in the spring or summer of 1944. The key is that they didn't know exactly where, and they didn't know exactly when. They basically planned for us to arrive by crossing the Pas de Calais, which is around 23 miles from England to France, and that's in northern France. They thought that we would either arrive there or Normandy. but they didn't know which one we would choose and exactly when we would arrive. Point being is that they had to divide their forces. Had Ernst Rommel, the German commander on D-Day, had he been able to do what he wanted to do, which was to place a lot of German panzer divisions in Normandy, D-Day would have failed. But unfortunately, Hitler overruled Rommel, and the Germans split their forces. And so when we arrived on the 6th of June, 1944, we were only facing half of what Rommel would have intended us to face.
Alex Kershaw, resident historian for the Friends of the National World War II Memorial, where you will, if you go down today to the mall, you'll see a really stoic and beautiful, moving remembrance of the D-Day invasion 80 years ago today. Thank you so much for joining us, Alex.
My pleasure.
It is impossible not to feel some level of emotion when you think about, obviously, the loss, but also the courage, the sacrifice, the bravery, the incredible human achievement. There's a reason why they're called the greatest generation.
You were young the day you took these cliffs. Some of you were hardly more than boys with the deepest joys of life before you. Yet you risked everything here. Why? Why did you do it? Well, what impelled you to put aside the instinct for self-preservation and risk your lives to take these cliffs? What inspired all the men of the armies that met here? We look at you and somehow we know the answer. It was faith and belief. It was loyalty and love. The men of Normandy had faith that what they were doing was right, faith that they fought for all humanity, faith that a just God would grant them mercy on this beachhead or on the next. It was the deep knowledge, and pray God we have not lost it, that there is a profound moral difference between the use of force for liberation and the use of force for conquest. You were here to liberate, not to conquer, and so you and those others did not doubt your cause.
It is 7:45. Coming up in our 8 o'clock hour, Mercedes, is going to be a really interesting conversation. You know, we decried remote learning when it was forced upon students, keeping them home, bothering parents' schedules. It was a really real problem for a whole generation of children during COVID. That said, there have actually been some children who have benefited from it. I can speak from personal experience. My child, who is on the autistic spectrum, he utilized virtual learning. Actually, it helped him. He actually progressed easier and faster and further by using virtual learning for many of his therapies. Now, because he has an individualized instruction plan, an IEP, he is able to continue with virtual learning in the school district he's in. For others, though, especially in Montgomery County and Frederick County, they're about to have this ripped away from them. Also, for other students, you know, parents who have been really hands-on with their kids through virtual learning, they've been able to sort of, you know, work with their kids and really help them with their educational process by being right next to them while they do virtual learning, sort of a quasi-homeschool setting. There have been benefits, and the school systems want to rip this away now for some reason.
Well,
and they don't quite understand it because they got a lot of money during COVID. Why can't they continue to use some of that money?
But it looks like Frederick County Public Schools, they're facing a $50 million budget cap. Hello.
Where'd all that money go? Where'd all the money go they got from the
people?
federal government?
But here's the deal. This virtual learning, and again, I think it works especially well for those with learning difficulties, or if you have ADHD or anxiety, or I think, you got to prioritize the students, and it is about school choice, and let the parents help decide that factor, as opposed to just the school board saying we got to, cut it out because of our budget gap. It's
typical government-run schools where they want this one-size-fits-all plan. Well, coming up in the next hour, we're going to hit it with Montgomery County at 8 o'clock and then Frederick at 8:35. Keep it here at 7:54.